Hey witches, welcome to Busy, Gritty, Inked and Witchy, a magical living podcast for the busy witch. I'm Morgan, eclectic witch of almost 25 years, Avalon priestess, and busy witch. Here we'll talk all things witchy, from current metaphysical happenings to my busy witch tips and tricks, and everything in the in-between. This podcast is my personal journey, filled with my knowledge, opinions, and unique way of looking at the world. Join me as I weave the magical and the mundane in every episode. Hey witches, welcome back to Busy, Gritty, Inked and Witchy. I am Morgan, and today I'm gonna get a little deep and personal with you all. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous just because I have been called, going through some stuff lately, and I've really been called to share my story as a whole. And I think over the last 100 and some episodes, I've maybe shared a little bit of a tidbit here in this episode or a little bit in this episode. But this is something I'm currently working on, and it's something that has really made itself known to me. And it keeps coming up. And so I'm like, you know what? It is time to put it all together and have me share my full story with you all, past, present, and hopefully future. And maybe someone out there will resonate with it. Okay, so I'm going to share with y'all my journey with anxiety and personal power struggles that I have gone through in the past that I'm still going through now. There is, witchy information, of course, thrown into this episode, but this is a very personal episode for me to do because I am going to be sharing so much of myself and my journey with you all today. And of course, we'll be talking about how my anxiety has affected me as a witch and hopefully what I'm planning on doing for the future when it comes to my anxiety and everything. So to start out, contrary to social media and maybe even how some of my Ink Spirit Coven members know me, I am actually an introvert, which is also super weird for me. I understand because people hear that they oh, you're an introvert, but you have a podcast and you put yourself out and you make funny reels on Instagram and you do this, you do this. And I do. It's super easy for me to sit in front of my computer or front of my phone and be myself, or make people laugh, or do fun things. So it's super easy because it's me and my computer or me and my phone. And for you astrology witches out there, it's also super weird because I'm a Leo moon and a Leo rising. So I should be loving the spotlight, loving how I am and trailblazing and all this stuff. And I'm not. And I'm an Aquarius sun, just in case you're keeping track. So very thought driven, very intellectual, kind of into my nerdy self. But yeah, I have a Leo moon and a Leo rising. So I should be, I'm a lion, hear me roar. But honestly, due to some personal power issues that happened mainly in high school for me, I stick to myself. I doubt my own abilities as a witch, but also as a human intellectual being. I think I have told my origin story in the past. So if you've gone through past podcast episodes of how I, quote unquote, became a witch, it was because of bullying done in high school. And so that extended into, a lot of other areas of my life where I began to doubt myself and who I was. Okay. Eventually it led to extreme anxiety. So about 5 years ago, and I had to look back at Facebook photos to figure out when I was at the height of my anxiety. And it was crazy because I can remember a specific trip to Phoenix, which is just 2 hours away, where I almost didn't go. It was a family trip up there. And I almost didn't go because I had a panic attack, a massive panic attack. And that's the last massive panic attack I remember having. So I actually had to go onto Facebook, go through my stories or my pictures to see when this trip was. And of course, by the pictures on Facebook, you would never have known that I almost did not go on this trip because of a massive panic attack. But that was 5 years ago. And I would say that my deep anxiety probably started about 6 years ago, but I was borderline agoraphobic. So trips to the grocery store caused panic attacks for me. I got to the point where I would spend numerous moments stuck in bathrooms at movie theaters. Movie theater and me, we were arch nemesis back then. The gem show, I actually had panic attacks at the gem show. And you all know that I fucking love the gem show every year. Like, that's our livelihood. We buy our inventory for the entire year at the Tucson Gem Show in February. I have had many a panic attack in a porta potty at the gym show. Restaurants. Oh yeah, I'm a foodie too. You have to understand. So if there is anything to know about me, I am a foodie. I am a movie buff. And those were two of the worst things for me, were the movie theater and restaurants. I didn't even go to friends' homes because I would have panic attacks in their bathroom. So yeah, we didn't go to the movies for almost a year because of the physical, like what would physically happen to me if we went to the movies. Yeah, that's how bad it was. And this was only 5 years ago, okay? So anxiety, of course, on a biological level can be so many different things. And it's up to you if you have anxiety to figure out. But anxiety is a blend of physical, but also mental, emotional. Okay. And like I said, if you have anxiety, it's up to you to figure out how to hack it and how to overcome it and find your recipe for overcoming it. Okay. So of course, today is my story and my journey with anxiety and what worked for me, which may not work for everyone. All right. But anxiety on a metaphysical level, so on like an energetic or a spiritual level, is actually an imbalance of your solar plexus chakra. Okay. That is your personal power center. And that sits in between your lungs and your belly button. Okay. So like right above your belly button, right around where your diaphragm is, that's where your solar plexus chakra lives. And that is your personal power center. It governs your self-confidence. It governs your personal power. It governs whether or not you have anxiety, believe it or not. So as I started to see what my anxiety was doing to other people, for example, friends were starting to not ask me if I wanted to come out anymore because they knew I wasn't going to. And they knew about my anxiety. So they have been on this journey with me for years. But they stopped asking. Or sometimes they would ask and they'd be like, I mean, I'm having a party. If you want to come, you can. And I'd be like, I would love to come. Because that's always my answer. I always wanted to do these things. I always wanted to go to the movies. I wanted to go to restaurants. I wanted to go to friends' houses. Like, I wanted to do these things. But my anxiety was a almost like a person of its own, always fucking talking shit to me. I saw that, my family was getting so disappointed about missing out on concerts or missing out on going to like the fair or missing out on going to the movies because I would have a panic attack leaving the house. So I worked at my house, I worked at home, I did everything in home. And then, through things like Amazon at the time, Amazon grocery was a really big thing. So I could just order my groceries and have them sent to my house within 2 days, But yeah, so as I started to see what my anxiety was doing to others around me, I really threw myself into researching how to heal my solar plexus chakra. Okay. Because I had been in therapy for years at this point. It's really funny, like looking back now, I actually stopped going to therapy when I was at my worst because my therapist switched offices and my anxiety was like, oh, well, she switched offices and that's super scary and we can't go. And I was like, you're right, we can't go. So I actually stopped therapy for my anxiety and my borderline agoraphobia because my therapist switched offices and that was too scary for me. So yeah, anyway. So I went about it alone for a few years, which I do not recommend to anyone, especially if you are agoraphobic or borderline agoraphobic. I highly recommend therapy. If you suffer from debilitating anxiety the way I did, I highly recommend therapy. Even if your therapist switches offices, do it. Just go. It'll be okay because there will be a familiar face when you get there. Okay. And then eventually you'll learn the way and it will become fine. Okay. So I went about it by myself for a while, but I had my therapist's advice in the back of my head at all times. And I think I've mentioned this at some point in one of my episodes. She had this advice of, so what? And so I remember coming in one time and somebody had fucked up at work and fucked up an order. And I had just found out about it as I was pulling into the therapy office. It was a minor fuck up. Honestly, on the scale of 1 to 10, it was so tiny. It wasn't even on the scale. It was so tiny. But here you are, living in a state of fight or flight, completely anxiety ridden. And it was like the end of the world to me. So she was walking me through it and she was like, okay, so why are you so filled with anxiety right now? And I was like, oh, this just happened, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, okay. And she's like, so what's the worst that can happen? And I'm like, well, and so, I'm like, I don't know, the person stops becoming a customer. And she's like, okay, so what? And I'm like, well, of course I want to make all the customers happy. And she's like, okay, but what if you don't make this one happy? And I'm like, well, then they'll stop shopping with me. And she's like, okay, but it was an honest mistake and you're trying to remedy it, right? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, then so what? So if they choose to not shop with you after you have apologized and you are making efforts to fix the mistake, then so what? And so this was her advice for me always. Like if I started to have a panic attack about something, she would have me so what it all the way out to the end of the scenario. And then for a lot of them, she'd be like, okay, at the end of this scenario, did you die? And I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, then so what? And I always thought it was the stupidest advice ever until I stopped going to therapy and I was doing my anxiety thing by myself. And then I realized it was genius and I should have kept going to her. Anyway, so that would go through my head. So as soon as my anxiety, another thing that really helped is she helped me personify my anxiety. Okay, so I actually drew it out on a piece of paper one time. And that was, so whenever, as I was going through my anxiety journey and I would hear this anxiety-ridden voice in my head, I would picture that thing that I had drawn. I had personified anxiety. And that helped me out so much because it's really hard to tell your anxiety to shut the fuck up, but it is so easy to, you've drawn it, you've given it form, to picture that thing talking to you and then be like, you know what, shut the fuck up. There is something extremely powerful about it. So if you have anxiety and you have not ever personified it or given it form, drawn it, and I mean, mine was not like a person. Mine was like a little scribble stick figure, honestly. And so it was like a stick figure that looked like it had a tornado around it. Because that's how my anxiety felt to me, was like a tornado. So it was literally a tornado stick figure that I drew in black, and that was what it was. So every time from that point forward, once she had me personify my anxiety, it was so much easier that when I would hear the anxiety, that little voice telling me, oh, you can't go do that because you might have a panic attack out in public, I would sit there and in my mind stare, I would picture it and I would look at it and I would say, so what? So what if I have a panic attack? Am I ever going to see these fuckers again? If I'm going to the grocery store and I have a fucking panic attack, is anybody going to ever fucking know who I am or that I had a fucking panic attack? And let me see, if somebody did see me having a panic attack and they're like, look at that fucker over there having a panic attack, aren't they the dick? Yes, they are. So my so what philosophy that my therapist had taught me worked so much, along with personifying my anxiety. So I'm working on it through on my own. And then a non-related medical emergency landed me in the hospital one night and I felt a panic attack coming on. And so I'm laying in the emergency room and I feel this panic attack coming on. And I just had this final, so fucking what? I am at the fucking hospital. I'm in the emergency room. I'm in a bed. So if I have a fucking panic attack, I am surrounded by people who know what the fuck to do with me. And so I was like, you know what? Bring it on. I don't even fucking care anymore. Bring on the panic attack. And I sat there and I waited. I waited for the panic to build and take over me. And I waited for a panic attack. And instead, the opposite happened. It slowly melted away. So I guess for me, it was like I faced my panic attack and I faced my anxiety head on. And I said, you know what, fucker, I'm done. Fine, come at me. And it was like, oh shit. Well, we didn't expect her to do that. We run on fear. We run on the fear and the threat of shit happening, not real shit happening. So it went away. And that was a big key for me starting to overcome my anxiety, was this night at the hospital. About 6 months later, the pandemic kicked off. And while I think we all experienced a level of anxiety on a global scale for not only our health and well-being, but the health and well-being of humanity, I think the diversion from my own anxiety and my own shit helped. If that makes any kind of sense. I was now focusing on something bigger than me. I was focusing on something, way more powerful than just my little issues of not being able to leave the house. Like not being able to leave the house. Now I couldn't physically leave the house. We were under quarantine. But I think it was also the disconnect from everything. I stopped watching the news because of the anxiety that it caused. So the disconnect from shit that caused me anxiety and really putting up that boundary during the pandemic and focusing and putting my intention on what mattered around me, my family, my business, things like that, I think actually helped me a lot with my anxiety. Okay. So today I have come so far. I fucking love the movies. I'm really upset that there's not a lot of good ones coming out right now because of all the strikes that have been happening. So we're kind of in like this movie lull. Recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I went to Phoenix, 2 hours away, to just a concert. Like we went up there for a concert, came back the same night. Amazing. 0 issues. I've been heading out and teaching in-person classes more, which is also something I did not do because of my anxiety. I've been doing in-person events for the store for the last few weekends, and every single day I practice gratitude. On the drive to the Celtic Festival every day this past weekend, I was so grateful for my ability to get there, drive myself there, no anxiety, no nothing, drive myself back, enjoy myself there, eat food there. Because that was another thing, like physically, I was so nauseous, and when I was having a panic attack, everything in my body wanted outside of my body in whatever quickest way it could possibly happen. So if you could imagine that without me getting too graphic. So I never ate anything anywhere because I never knew if I could keep it in my body, So being able to go to the Celtic Festival and enjoy the food and enjoy coffee and enjoy all of this stuff was absolutely amazing to me. So I absolutely give thanks for that each and every day. Okay, gratitude magic is very big with me. But, and here's the but, this is where we get to the fun stuff. And I know this looks like it's going to be a longer episode. I had my cards read this past weekend at the Celtic Festival. And the first thing is the cards totally called me out on not taking my own advice. She was like, well, it's like you give advice out to people all the time, but you don't actually take it. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, no, I can see where I might be giving advice out, like, through my podcast and through my coven and, through social media. And then she's like, but you're not taking it. And I'm like, okay. And then not believing in myself. That was another thing that the cards were like, you don't believe in yourself. And I'm like, okay. So I started to wonder if I still had like residual solar plexus issues. I also noticed too, this kind of coincided with it, that with my ventures out into the world, doing classes, doing in-person events for the shop, that I have fans. And if you can't tell, that is very hard for me to say out loud. I also have some throat chakra problems as well when it comes to speaking my truth a lot of times. Sorry. So it is hard for me to be like, oh, I have fans. And after talking about it this weekend, we, and I'll get to we in a second, we think that that is also a solar plexus issue, okay? I put myself out there all over the place. The podcast, social media, my coven, the business, so it shouldn't have come as a shock to me, but I met a few of them over the last few weekends, and it was amazing, and their energy was amazing, and it was so great. And I want you to know, because I know some of them are podcast listeners, it was absolutely amazing meeting you, okay? It stirred something within me that I was like, ooh, okay, this is a weird feeling. And it was a little bit of panic, and it was a little bit of, how do I deal with this? Because the thought never occurred to me that I have fans. I know. And I'm sorry if this also sounds arrogant. That's not what I'm trying to, portray with this episode today. But I am so grateful for the people that I did meet in person, and some of them came hours to see me, and that was a little overwhelming too, but in a great way. Like, you helped me on my journey, and I need you to know that you helped me out of my little shell, and you have helped me. And the fact that I know you can hear the emotional response that's causing it's because it has been so profound. Okay, like just meeting you, it caused things in me, and it stirred things in me that have been amazing. But that doesn't mean I'm still processing them, So anyway, I probably was super awkward, and I apologize for that. But it's this going through this process and going through and fighting through these solar plexus issues, okay? So I had my cards read, and after I had my cards read, I was talking with Molly, who is our candle maker. Now, Molly has known me for 10 years now, okay? And she has been beside me on my anxiety journey, like as a friend, as a hand to hold, like, hey, I understand you're going through some shit right now, and I'm here for you. But if you want to come out, I'm having a party this weekend. Like, that was Molly. And if I said, no, I can't, then she completely understood. And even when we were setting up on Friday, her mom was there, and her mom knows everything as well, like knows my whole anxiety journey. I went over and gave her mom a hug, and she looked at me right in my eyes, and she said, I am so proud of you. And that meant so much to me because she knows what I've been through. And how far I have come. So for someone to have noticed that and acknowledged that meant a lot to me. And it also kind of validated that, like, it really was bad at one point. Like, my anxiety was super fucking stupid at one point. So anyway, after I had my cards read, Molly and I were sitting there talking about it. And she agreed that my awkwardness now is probably also a solar plexus issue. Not having confidence in myself, not seeing the effect that I can have on other people, not seeing myself as an inspiration, not seeing myself as a person who can influence others. All of those are solar plexus issues, like 100%, not having confidence in myself. And it pours over, unfortunately, into my witchiness and into my magic. Like, for example, 15 years ago, I owned a brick and mortar store in South Carolina. I did tarot readings in my shop. I did aura readings in my shop, okay? Back then, I had a spirit guide who talked to me. Her name was Sheila, and she legit talked to me all the time. I freaking heard her all the time, okay? And so I was clairaudient, which means clear hearing. I could hear things. I was clairvoyant, which is clear vision, clear seeing. So I had visions. I was claircognizant, which is clear knowing, which means I would just open up my mouth and fucking words would come out, and I didn't know where they came from, and then they came true. So, and then I was also clairsentient, which is basically an empath, clear feeling. Okay. I was all of these things, and I never questioned it. Not one fucking time. Not one. When I started hearing voices, never thought maybe I'm schizophrenic. Nope. I think, okay, it might be because when I started hearing voices and she was telling me stuff, I would look at the person. I would be like, so excuse me, blah, 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 blah. And they'd be like, how did you know that? And I'd be like, oh shit. So I'm not schizophrenic. Like, this is real. Okay. All right, cool. I embraced who I was. I embraced my abilities. And then they got out of hand. I was so open that I had little control over them. And at the time, I was the person in town that you went and talked to when you had these issues. So here I was basically going through this myself alone. No internet, no people that had been through this before that could help me. And I basically had movies playing in my head all the time about people, and it was shit that people did not want me to know about them. And you know, when they would start playing, I would validate them to those close to me. Like I would have a movie playing, and I would tell them what I was seeing out loud, and they would be like, "Yep, that's a thing that actually happened in my life." And it was just always happening. Like I got to the point where I couldn't go to crowded areas. I couldn't be around a lot of people because it was just constant visions, constant inflow of fucking emotions and all kinds of shit. So after a really fucked up vision that I had about my best friend at the time, and when I kind of would go into like this trance while the movie played out in my head, and I was apparently talking to her the whole time, telling her what I was seeing. When I came out of this trance, the sheer look of horror on her face, and she was crying, and she looked right at me and she said, "I never told you that fucking story. How did you know that?" And I said, I don't know. She's like, "You described everything, even down to what I was wearing and what I was thinking in my mind." She's like, "I never wanted anyone to know that part of me." And she got up and marched out of my store and just went outside to smoke a cigarette. And I went out there to smoke too. And that look that my best friend gave me, I broke down that night. And I said, "I can't do this anymore. I don't want this anymore. I take it back. I don't want any of it." And I flipped a switch and I turned it off because I never wanted a person that I love to look at me in sheer horror again, you know? So I turned it off, and it's something that I now regret because I have been trying like hell for years to quote unquote get it back. And I'm doing little bunny air quotes, okay? So this is funny, just the trying to get it back part, because during my card reading this past weekend, she also called me out on this. She told me that I've been waiting for some sign or switch to be flipped when all I have to do is accept myself and allow myself to just be, and I'll find out it never went away. She had no idea what she was talking about at the time. I had not told her anything. I had not asked a question, like out loud. I had not told her anything, and this was the advice she gave me. So she had no idea what it pertained to, and she even looked at me and was like, "Does that make sense to you?" And I'm trying not to cry because it seriously hit home for me. So after that, Molly and I talked, and we connected some of the dots in my life and in my energy. And this is what I came up with. Basically, 5-6 years ago, my solar plexus was nearly dead. Okay. This was the analogy that made sense to me. I nursed it back to health. I brought it back to life. Okay. But that doesn't mean, it's only been maybe 4 years. Really, since I had all that shit happen. 3 if you count the pandemic, you know? So it's only been 3 to 4 years since I've really started to have a healthier solar plexus chakra. So that doesn't mean, in the grand scheme of 42 years of being on this earth, if something is near death and we're only 3 to 4 years past that, it's not back to 100%, you know? I'm still at the healing stage of this. And if you're thinking about something being almost dead and everything is an improvement, that at some point we're going to just hit the self-doubt, the not realizing who I am, how powerful I am, and the accepting myself fully, awkwardness and all, clairvoyant abilities and all, strange voices in my head and all. Eventually, that's something that if your solar plexus is starting to get sick, you're going to go down and hit. But I'm coming up. I still got to go through that on my way back up. So I'm at that point of my healing journey, okay? Those would all be signs of someone with a solar plexus issue, which I still have. But I view them as I'm heading upwards because they're less damaging, those issues of, self-confidence, accepting myself fully, accepting and owning my power. Those are less of an issue than not being able to leave the fucking house. So where I'm at right now is I've been called to look into my witch wound, which is another thing that has come up when you're talking about personal power and witches. And basically, the witch wound is just the wound that all of us witches carry back from, hundreds of years ago. We're talking like as a collective of we couldn't be ourselves. We couldn't tell people we were witches. We couldn't come out of the broom closet because we would be burned at the stake. So I'm looking into my witch wound, researching that to help me reclaim my power and help further heal my solar plexus. I've also been doing some somatic exercises. So this goes more into the sacral chakra. But again, if you have an imbalance in one chakra, you also have to look at the chakra above that and below that, because generally speaking, you're going to have some issues with those as well. Okay. So my sacral chakra, which is one chakra down, which affects your hips. I started with hip issues about a year ago, like really bad hip issues a year ago. And I started some hip opening then. And then I've been doing it all over again. But this time I decided to go the somatic route, which is just conscious movement. So I do somatic exercises to help calm my system down, help lower my cortisol levels, help lower my overall stress, and release trauma and emotions that are stored in my hips. So I started that 2 months ago, and I have seen absolutely huge improvements in overall stress levels and how grounded I am on a daily basis. If that sounds interesting to you, if you're kind of like, oh, what is she talking about? I highly recommend looking up Liz, the Workout Witch. So her handles on TikTok and Instagram are the Workout Witch. And I think on Instagram, it's the Workout Witch _. But she has an amazing 30-day program to release your hips, release trauma, release pent-up emotions and everything. I'm about halfway through that 30-day program. I went ahead and bought the bundle to move up because I also have shoulder issues, which is a misalignment or issues with my throat chakra and my heart chakra. So I went ahead and bought the 3-course bundle. So we're doing hips for 30 days, then we move up to shoulders and neck after that. Shoulders, neck, and jaw, I think. But I highly recommend looking her up. If nothing else, her Instagram and her TikTok are a plethora of knowledge. And that's where I started out for about a month, just watching her videos and doing some of the exercises she shows for free before I, invested in the 3-course program thingy. So as far as working on my solar plexus with magical helpers, the color yellow is associated with the solar plexus. So any kind of yellow food, wearing the color yellow or yellow gemstones really help nurture that. For example, tiger's eye is considered a solar plexus gemstone. So that's what I've been working with. But you can also work with citrine or yellow jade. The affirmation for the solar plexus chakra is I do. I don't sit here and say it over and over again. I do, I do, I do. But what I have found that has helped leaps and bounds for me is I actually concentrate on things that I am doing now that I have not been able to do in the past because my anxiety told me I couldn't. So whenever we do go to the movies, I sit in the theater eating my popcorn with a big fucking smile on my face like I am a 6-year-old child. And my husband just looks at me and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm happy I'm here because I am here and I am just giving my thanks, So like I said, driving to the Celtic Festival, driving home from the Celtic Festival, I was giving my thanks because that's more evidence like I am doing this. This is something 5 years ago I could not do. So I focus on the things that I am able to do now, even if it's little things, which of course, back in the day when I was starting to heal my solar plexus, it was, hey, I went to the grocery store without having a panic attack. Yay, me. And that builds and strengthens your solar plexus chakra. And then the affirmation that I actually do say out loud that helps with my sacral chakra as well as my solar plexus chakra, kind of links the two together, is I create my reality and destiny. So this, like I said, links the two together and really helps strengthen both of those chakras. And just to kind of sum up, I am reaching the end here. This is a longer episode, but this was a very big one for me. I don't know if this is needed or not, but if today's episode popped some kind of bubble about me that any of you were thinking or how you perceived me, then I genuinely do apologize. It is actually very easy for me to put myself out there on the podcast or social media because it's just me and my phone and me and my computer, which I said before. And a lot of what I do online is part of my healing journey. But if anything that I've ever said or done in the past has caused you to think of me a certain way, and today's podcast episode burst that bubble for you, I really am sorry. I am still human. I do have human issues. And I am gotten really good, especially my anxiety started in high school. So, I mean, I've pretty much had anxiety for almost 30 years of my life. So even if you are sitting here and you've been with me as a customer for years and you're thinking about 5 years ago and you're like, I would have never known it, I was really good at covering it up. Really good. And again, when it's just me on my computer or me on my phone, it's different because like I don't think about what's happening on the other end. You know, like I'm sitting here talking to my microphone and my computer right now. I'm not thinking about how many people are going to listen to this episode after this goes out, you know? But I hope by sharing more of my story today that I can help someone out there who is listening, who might be going through something similar. And that's why I wanted to share this. And it was never my intention to have misled anyone. And if that happened, at some point, I do apologize. I do. So that is all that I have for you all today. I definitely want to thank you for listening and for giving me a platform to share my journey because this is part of my healing process. And I think through my healing process and through being able to share it with other people, I've been told that it has helped other people as well. And that's why I do this, is to share my knowledge and to share my journey and to help witches out there know that they are not alone and that I'm here with them. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, I will see you all then. Bye. If you're looking for a magical community where you can just be yourself, check out my Ink Spirit Coven. The Coven is an online learning circle for eclectic witches who want to learn new witchcraft practices and how to easily incorporate magic into their daily lives, all while being supported on their personal spiritual journey. And you'll have me as your magical mentor, sharing my knowledge, answering questions, and facilitating the online community. Head to inkspirit.com to learn more and join. And if unique witchcraft supplies made by witches for witches is just what you need, head to my store, inkgoddesscreations.com, to see what we have to enhance your magical practice. We also have the Ink Goddess Creations box, a monthly subscription of magic mail filled with exclusive items that fit a magical theme. Head to the site to see this month's theme and sneak peeks.